Greetings, everybody. Coming at you with another video. Actually, this is going to be a little bit of a series, so there's going to be more than one part to this. Um, and I am titling this series The Tale of Two Little Horns, 1844, Cleansing the Temple, and 2300 Days. This is the Adventist confusion. Now, why do I call it confusion? Well, simply put, that um, Adventist believers, Seventh-day Adventist believers, believe that Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 are comparably the same thing. And as we dive further into this, actually, this is going to be a multi-part study. This is going to be dealing with the 2300 days. This is going to dive into Daniel 9 eventually. So after Daniel 7, Daniel 8 is taken care of, we're going to go look at Daniel chapter 9 and figure some things out. Now, rather that, the simple fact is they do have some of the years correct, regarding history. Okay. But what happens is when they put their doctrine around it and they try to meld something together to fit their agenda of prophecy, which we will see clearly within these two chapters that it is wrong, it is an error, and it causes confusion. Okay? And obviously we know that according to 1 Corinthians 14:31 through 33, specifically verse 33, for ye may all prophesy one by one, that all may learn and all may be comforted. And the spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets. Okay? Speaking of the prophets of the Bible, no one else, not Ellen White, no other modern day prophet or whatsoever, the prophets of Scripture. And then obviously, for God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a portion from Daniel 7, explain Daniel 7 briefly, and then we're going to read the entire chapter of Daniel 8, because Daniel 7 and Daniel 8, there's a very, very distinct difference between Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 that I really, really want you to pay attention to, and that is language of the text. The book of Daniel is a very interesting book. We have two different dialogue of text. We have two different languages in Daniel, spoken in Daniel. We have Aramaic and we have Hebrew. I do believe that that plays an important part within this discussion. Uh, just like the words of Jesus, when you see like words like telekathumi, or the language that was spoken when he says it is, or my God, why hast thou forsaken me? He wasn't speaking in Hebrew. He spoke in Aramaic in no certain terms. Just like the term Golgotha is an Aramaic term, not Hebrew. The term Maranatha is not a Hebrew term. It's Aramaic. Okay, Golgotha, Aramaic, telekathumi, my God, why hast thou I mean, all those are Aramaic terms. And Jesus spoke in an Aramaic dialect based on what I read there in the Gospels. So Aramaic and Hebrew, and by the way, Aramaic was a Chaldean language. That was the language actually that was spoken by Abraham. Abraham was Chaldean. If you really look at it carefully, Abraham was Chaldean. He was not a Hebrew. He was not a Jew. We're going to get started, and we're going to read Daniel chapter 7, well, a portion of Daniel 7, and then we're going to dive into Daniel chapter 8. And you're going to see this term little horn appear in both chapters. Now, I'm going to show you something after we read these chapters. We're just going to get a quick overview right now. And then we're going to do a little bit of a word study. And then we're going to get into discussing about this confusion and why it is confusion. And again, God is not the author of confusion. There's going to be a lot of topic regarding the temple. The second temple, Herod's temple, and how it transpired throughout the last, oh, 400, 500, 600 years until the destruction of that temple in 70 AD. And these types of things, because it's very, very significant. Okay, very significant. Okay, so Daniel 7:7. And also, I do believe it's very important that we understand and grasp this. Because I'm going to get into Daniel chapter 9, the 70 weeks prophecy. And I'm going to, just a brief overview on that. That 70 weeks prophecy is not talking about a 7-year peace treaty with Israel and Palestine. It is not talking about the Antichrist. Sure, maybe Antichrist might use that, but it is not a fulfillment of that prophecy, for Daniel 9 has already been fulfilled. Partially? Maybe that's up for debate. I'm starting to lean towards that it was fully fulfilled. But again, that's up for debate. That's up for further discussion. But I can almost guarantee you that it is not talking about Antichrist. So Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, Daniel 7 makes mention of these beasts. The first beast, which was like a lion, which was Babylon, which is represented by the head of gold in the statue dream of Daniel chapter 2. Then you had the bear, which was raised up on one side with the ribs in its mouth. That represented the um, Medo-Persia, with the chest and the arms of, and also that is, what's the word I'm looking for? Cross-reference to Daniel 2 as the chest and arms in the statue dream. And then the third beast was a leopard type beast, which is reference to Daniel chapter 2 in the statue dream as the belly and thigh of brass, which was Greece, or in biblical term Gresha. And the fourth beast that we're reading here is represented by the iron of the legs in Daniel chapter 2, which goes further into the feet, which was mixed of iron and clay. So that's just a brief overview of how these beasts correspond with Daniel chapter 2, regarding these beasts and these kingdoms, which also you can read about it in Revelation, where it talks about a beast that has a amalgamation. It has like a melting pot, a stew, basically, if you will, of all these beasts combined. So I just figured I'd discuss that briefly. So verse 8, how he talked about the 10 horns here. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. Now, Adventists are correct in pointing out that this little horn is represented by the Roman Empire, or pagan Rome, or papal Rome, however you want to put it, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. Obviously, this is talking about the very end times, the end of this kingdom, this Roman kingdom of this little horn, which is basically the time that we are in now. We are at the portion of that statue of the iron and clay. Okay? Throughout the great realm of history. That's basically where we are at. Now, we're going to jump to Daniel 8. starting in verse 1. We're going to read the whole chapter. We're not going to just use one verse. We're going to read the whole chapter in its context and see what exactly this prophecy is and what it is talking about. Because the term little horn is mentioned here. But is it the same little horn that is mentioned here as Adventists like, Professor Veith has talked about, and these types of things, if you're familiar with him? Now, granted, I like some of his teachings. I think there are some of his teachings which are true. But then he's got Adventist doctrine because he's a Seventh-day Adventist, and their doctrine is it's highly flawed. And you're going to see that within these two chapters. All you got to do is read it for yourselves. Not worry about how people are going to interpret it for you. Okay? Even me. Don't just listen to me. Don't just listen to how I'm explaining this. I'm just explaining to you how God has revealed it to me so that I can share it with you. And then you be like the Bereans that you're supposed to be and search these things out to see whether these things are so. Okay? So Daniel chapter 8, starting in verse 1, the whole chapter. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was in Shushan, in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other. Just like the bear, with the bear with the one side that was raised higher than the other. Okay, there's a little clue there. Now also, you see a mention of ram. I'm going to get into a little picture diagram here, and that's going to show you and compare you the difference. Because what is a ram in regarding to the sacrificial system in ancient Hebrew in the Old Testament? A ram is a sacrificial animal. It's not an unclean animal. The beasts in Daniel chapter 7 are all unclean animals. Something to pay attention to. Okay, so I heard a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west, again another sacrificial animal, a clean beast, came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. Now, one thing I want to point out here is Daniel is in vision. He's seen a vision. When you read about visions in the Bible, more often than not, real close to 100% of the time, maybe it is 100% of the time, that visions aren't exactly to be interpreted in a literal sense. Just like Ezekiel's temple in Ezekiel chapter 40 through 48, where some people think that that is literal animal sacrifices that are going to be taking place in the millennial kingdom. You got to understand, this is in vision. This is a vision that Ezekiel is seeing. Now, again, I don't have time to get into that, but that's just something you have to keep in mind regarding this the sacrificial system of the Old Testament coming back, okay, in the millennial kingdom. All right. And he came to the ram that had the 2 horns which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. So here comes the goat that is charging after the ram, okay, and he smashes into him, he runs into him. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. So here comes this goat that basically overpowered and overtook this ram. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. Here we see something that happens between something of four. Okay, we see in Daniel chapter 7, speaking of the leopard of Greece, we see in Daniel chapter 7 how there's four heads of the Grecian Empire, of the Greek Empire. Let's pay attention to that. Verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn. There's that term little horn again. Now, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given him against daily sacrifices by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Okay, so here we have this little horn, very interesting, which came out of what? It came out of the goat. Okay, it came out of the he-goat, which waxed very great. What is this he-goat? Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, this is where Adventists talk about that in 1844, because they take this 2,300 days, take the prophecy in Daniel 9, the 70 weeks, put that inside the 2,300 days, take passages of Scripture, say that a day is equal to a year, and all of time prophecy that regards time, including this one. And they say, well, from 457 BC until 1844, that was 2,300 years, so therefore in 1844, the heavenly sanctuary was cleansed, and the investigative judgment, according to Ellen White, has begun. Because in their history, they were expecting the return of Jesus Christ, and it didn't happen in 1844, so they had to come up with something to put their minds at ease. So they basically built up another doctrine around this. And this is the doctrine that they stand by even to this day. And it came to pass, so that's basically their quick rendition of the 2,300 days. Basically, in a nutshell. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Verse 15. And it came to pass, when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision, and sought for the meaning, then, behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So this saint that was speaking to another saint was a man speaking to Gabriel. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now, people will take this to mean, well, this has to be talking about the end times. Not necessarily, because this vision is strictly a vision between this goat and this ram. It's still the same vision that Daniel is in dialogue with with Gabriel about, the 2,300 days. This is still the same vision, folks. So I would take this in the context of this whole chapter to mean that this time of the end here is speaking till the time of the end of the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay? Because the ram is represented by the Medes and the Persians. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground. And he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. Now here we go. Now he's going to discuss this whole vision. Now remember, this is talking about the time of the end, the 2,300 days, all in one lump sum. This is the same vision. It's the same prophecy. Okay, so this is what I want you to keep in mind. Daniel 8:20. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now the first king, obviously, is without a doubt Alexander the Great. Okay. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power, not in Alexander the Great's power. But these were the four generals that took over these four kingdoms that is still part of that Greek Empire. And in the latter time of their kingdom, still talking about Greece here, when the transgressors are come to the full, again still talking about Greece, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Okay, in this passage, in the time of Daniel, the mighty and the holy people is represented by the children of Israel. Basically the tribe of Judah. Alright? And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. Okay. This same word days is translated as evenings and mornings. And I Daniel fainted and was sick. Certain days afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Now, isn't it interesting? If we look at parallel passages within this chapter, you see the term evening and the morning. And you see this, unto 2,300 days. Okay, right there. The vision of the evening and the morning. This is that vision of the evening and the morning. Now, why does it say 2,300 days here? But it says evening and morning here if this is the same vision. Good question. We're going to look at that. The term days, in regards to this, if you look in your concordance, here I have eSword. Let me just pull this up real quick. I want to show you something very interesting. Okay. If you look at Daniel 8:14, this is probably going to be kind of hard to see, but if you look at Daniel 8:14, you see the term days, and you see the numbers here. Now there are two different terms here, right next to days. Obviously, when you're looking at a King James Concordance reference type thing here, after each word there's going to be a number, okay? And it gives you the definition of the word and what have you, you know. But here, and here you have two, right after the word days. So that's very important. Why is that? Well, let's take a look at that again. As I showed you, you have unto 2,300 days, and you have evening and the morning. Okay, the word days, the first definition that is seen here is Hebrew Ereb, which means dusk, day, evening, or eventide, or night. Okay. Obviously, again, it can mean evening, night, sunset, evening, sunset, night, basically whatever. Basically evening. Okay. Plain and simple. If we look at the other definition, which is boker, which is properly dawn, as the break of day, or generally morning, which is early morning or morrow, and obviously morning, break of day, morning, end of night, coming of daylight, coming of sunrise, beginning of day, which is a very important one, the beginning of a day, of bright joy after night of distress, morrow, next day, next morning. So, we can look at these terms that Boker and Ereb translates the term days here as evening and morning. And Scripture actually defines that for us if we just read the whole chapter in context right here. And this is just further proof of that. Because again, you look at this, after the word days, you have two numbers there. So this word is actually, can be better translated. I don't really want to say better translated, but understood as evenings and mornings. Okay? Now, here's something very interesting. Let's do some more cross-referencing here. Obviously, if you look at Daniel 8:26, and the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true, wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. The word evening and morning is the same two words that we find in Daniel 8:15 that talks about 2,300 days. Evening and morning. It's the same thing. It means the same thing. And there is no difference. Where else do we see this in the Old Testament? Well, in the beginning, declaring the end from the beginning. And God called the light day. Interesting that the word day is capitalized and the word night is capitalized. And the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So this obviously is talking about literal days. This is not translated in 2,300 years. This is where Adventists fall in error. This is the same word that is used in Daniel 8:26, that is used in 8:15 regarding evening and mornings, and the morning were the first day. Obviously, what happened in the times of the Medes and the Greeks? Well, obviously, you had the 70-year captivity in Babylon. They came out of Babylon, went and restored Jerusalem, restored the temple, and they started their sacrifices. Ancient Hebrew required, obviously in the Old Testament, there was a morning and evening oblation or evening and morning sacrifice. Okay, and we're going to get into that more and more as we break this whole thing down. This is going to take a couple of videos to do. So, anyways, languages of the Bible. The Bible was written in the languages of ancient Palestine: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. The Old Testament has been transmitted to us primarily in these languages. Written mainly in Hebrew, it was translated into Greek, the Septuagint, before the text became quite stable. Some chapters and verses seem to have been written in Aramaic. Ezra 4, 8 through 6, and verse 18. Ezra 7, verses 12 through 26 was written in Aramaic. Daniel 2:4 verse through 7:28, and perhaps a few other verses, or at least they have been transmitted to us in Aramaic. The manuscripts do not distinguish them from the rest of the text. Now, again, Daniel 2:4 through 7:28 was written in Aramaic. It was a Chaldean language. It was a Gentile language. Still a Semitic type language, but it was not Hebrew. We see mention of the little horn in Daniel chapter 7, but Daniel chapter 7 was written in Aramaic. Daniel chapter 8 was written in Hebrew. It's very, very significant. Something to pay attention to. Aramaic is a Semitic language closely related to Hebrew. Its dialect has been in use since the 9th century BC. The Assyrians made Aramaic the common language of the Near East. Some parts of the Old Testament are written in Aramaic, and we just went over that, and perhaps a few other verses. Hebrew and Old Phoenician, Qumran, Aramaic, and modern scripts. Hebrew in the Old Phoenician square, Aramaic and modern print scripts in exile and under the Empire Aramaic letters replaced the Old Phoenician script for writing Hebrew, or Paleo-Hebrew, first in everyday life and then for copying the Bible. The presence of some Aramaic words in the New Testament are Talitha Kumi, Maranatha, and Golgotha suggests that Jesus spoke a dialect of Aramaic, not Hebrew. Greek. The opening words of Amos in Greek, uncials, capitals only, and minuscules. Greek uncial and minuscule writing. Greek was a language of Alexander's empire, and so the language of the East under the Romans. It was the common language of the New Testament writers. An early translation of the Hebrew Bible, the LXX, makes Greek important for Old Testament text criticism. Hebrew in the Old Square and modern print scripts was the spoken and written language of ancient Israel. It is close to other Canaanite languages. Other Canaanite dialects are Phoenician, Moabite, Edomite, and Ammonite. These tongues of Canaan are close to others in the northwest Semitic branch of the Semitic language family, in particular Ugaritic Canaanite culture, if not geography, which is similar to Hebrew, and Aramaic, language of some chapters of the Old Testament. After the exile under imperial rule, Aramaic became the language of the land. It wasn't Hebrew. I'll put a link to this information so you can look it up yourself. Now, the little horn of Daniel 8. Okay. In order to understand the 2300 days, one must first understand the identity of the little horn of Daniel 8:9. The little horn is the entity that makes the sanctuary desolate for 2300 days. Seventh-day Adventists teach that the little horn of Daniel 8 is the Roman power. Okay, just like they teach that the little horn in Daniel 7 is Roman power. Is the Roman power. They're both the same thing, according to SDA, or Seventh-day Adventists. Pioneer Adventist theologian J.N. Andrews writes, quote, Accordingly, the activities attributed to this little horn in Daniel 8, 10 through 13, 23 through 25, 1131 and 1211 are to be understood as embracing both pagan and papal Rome in their scope. In the prophecy of Daniel, the four kingdoms, the sanctuary, and the 2300 days. That was the book written by J.N. Andrews. Now, Adventist pioneer Uriah Smith assures us there can be no other explanation. So he's saying this is it. There is no other explanation that can explain this away. This is it. You basically must adhere to it, or else you're done, basically. Um, Quote, Rome meets all the specifications of the prophecy. No other power does meet them. Hence Rome and no other is the power in question in regard to Daniel 8. Daniel and the Revelation, page 162. So is it true that only Rome can possibly represent the little horn of Daniel 8? Let us examine the evidence. To understand why Adventists teach that the little horn of Daniel 8 is Rome, we must first go to the previous chapter of Daniel and Daniel 7, as we did just recently. There is also a little horn power which early Protestant scholars and later Adventists described as the persecuting power of Rome. Matthew Henry, writing in the year 1712, acknowledges that some Protestants believe the little horn of Daniel 7 to be Rome. Quote, this is from Matthew Henry Commentary, page 1075. Quote, the fourth kingdom to be that of the Romans, and the little horn to be Julius Caesar and the succeeding emperors, says Calvin, the Antichrist, the papal kingdom. Okay, so there's a lot of witnesses basically discussing how the fourth beast and the little horn in the fourth beast in Daniel 7 is the Roman power. Okay, there is no question about that. There is no question about that. You know, I mean, it doesn't take rocket scientists to figure that out when reading Daniel 7, that the little horn comes up out of the beast with 10 horns. Okay, and uproots 3 of the 10 horns. That's the Roman power. Okay, that is Rome. That is a Gentile. That is Gentile kingdom. Obviously, Greece is a Gentile kingdom, but Rome is the very last kingdom of this age before Christ returns. According to SDA teaching, the little horn of Daniel 7 and the little horn of Daniel 8 are the same power. At face value, this seems reasonable since they are both described as little horns. So, I mean, yeah, you would look at those two verses and Daniel 8 and Daniel 7, well, okay, that just means the same thing. But if you're not reading Daniel 8 in context with Daniel 7, you're going to come to that conclusion. If you're reading if you're reading Daniel chapter 8 fully in context with Daniel chapter 7 fully, you're going to come to understand that these little horns are different. However, we will soon discover there are far more differences than similarities between these two horns. First, there is an important shift in emphasis that happens in the book of Daniel between chapters 7 and 8. These differences indicate that while chapter 7 is focusing on the world in general, chapter 8 narrows the focus to future events of particular interest to Israel. Okay, well, let's take a look at that. Here's Daniel 7, Daniel 8. Here's a little quick overview here. The world powers in Daniel 7, as I mentioned before, are represented by unclean beasts. In Daniel 8, world powers represented by the sacrificial animals of the sanctuary service. Daniel chapter 7 was written in Aramaic, a Gentile language. This could indicate the intended audience is the Gentile world. Daniel chapter 8 was written in Hebrew. This could indicate the intended audience is the Jews, or the tribe of Judah. In Daniel chapter 7, you read that the prophetic spotlight is on the entire world. In Daniel chapter 8, the emphasis is on the Jewish sanctuary services. Okay, that's something to keep in mind when looking at this. Okay. The difference between the little horns of Daniel 7 and 8. There are important differences between the little horn of Daniel 7 and the little horn of Daniel 8. Okay. So let's go and look at that again. Here's some more differences. The little horn of Daniel 7 is associated with a beast representing the Fourth Empire. The little horn of Daniel 8 is associated with a beast representing the Third Empire. Adventists will have you believe that, the little horn in Daniel 8 cannot come out of the Third Empire, which is Greece, because the little horn is the same as the little horn of Daniel 7. But, whoa, you're contradicting Scripture, because it is true. The beast representing the Fourth Empire is the beast that is representing the Fourth Empire has a little horn. The beast, obviously, as we read in Daniel 8, comes out of the Third Empire, also has a little horn. The little horn of Daniel 7 rises directly out of the head of the beast. The little horn of Daniel 8, it does not come up from the head of the goat, but rises out of an already existing horn. The little horn of Daniel 7 comes up in the midst of 10 already existing horns, which according to SDA theology is after the fourth power has been divided into 10 parts, 476 AD. Little horn of Daniel 8 again, it rises from one of the four horns of the Third Empire. Little horn of Daniel 7 is a fresh new power rising out of the body of the old Fourth Empire, becoming the predominant horn among 7 other horns. The little horn of Daniel 8 is the imagery is of a small horn growing out from a larger horn, one of the four horns on the goat's head, Third Empire. Little horn of Daniel 7 uproots 3 horns in its rise, a little horn does. Little horn of Daniel 8 uproots no horns in its rise. Little horn Daniel 7, I skipped one, is a horn that comes out of a beast. Little horn of Daniel 8 is a horn that comes out of a horn. I mean, pay attention to detail, folks. Yeah, that might sound ridiculous, but pay attention to detail. Little horn of Daniel 7 is said to be diverse from the other 10 horns, conveying that this horn will be a new and different power. Little horn of Daniel 8, nothing indicating this horn is new or different in any way. The little horn in Daniel 7, the Aramaic for little horn in 7:8 is strictly translated another horn, a little one. The little horn of Daniel 8, the Hebrew for little horn in 8:9 is strictly translated a horn from littleness. Little horn of Daniel 7 is more stout than its fellows, verse 20. In other words, it represents a power that is stronger than those symbolized by the 10 other horns. And the little horn of Daniel 8 is a horn out of a horn of littleness. It is insignificant compared to the 4 notable horns and the 1 original Alexandrian horn of the goat. The little horn of Daniel 7, its field of influence is the entire Fourth Empire, since it arises from the head of the beast and becomes the dominant horn among the other 10 horns. The little horn of Daniel 8 pertains to only one of the 4 divisions of the great power. Its attention is restricted principally to a minor province of one division of the goat's empire, namely the pleasant land of verse 9, which is Palestine. The little horn of Daniel 7 lifts himself up against the Most High and the saints of the Most High. These are the saints of God throughout the entire Fourth Empire. From the Roman Empire, from pagan Rome to papal Rome, the Fourth Empire, period. From the Fourth Empire on. Okay. The little horn of Daniel 8. Malevolence is directed against the Jewish people, their high priest, sacrifices, and sanctuary. The atmosphere and coloring of chapter 8 indicate a local and Levitical battle. Okay, you can go ahead and pause this and compare the differences if you want to. Um, but you can tell, I mean, there are distinct differences. Very, very distinct differences. So when does the little horn of Daniel 8 arise? Daniel 8:9, and out of one of them, one of the goats' four horns, or Greece's four horns, came forth a little horn. Out of the what? Four horns, which waxed exceeding great toward the east and toward the pleasant land. Daniel 8:9 says the little horn would originate from one of the divisions of Alexander's empire when these were in their latter time. Verse 23, time of the end. Okay, this points us toward a power originating from the Greek world sometime after 300 BC. Rome was never part of the Alexandrian Empire, nor did it originate from one of the divisions of the Greek Empire. Rome came from Italy and was founded in 750 BC. Rome became a republic in 509 BC. Rome did conquer the four divisions of the Grecian Empire. But this is further proof that Rome did not arise from any of the four divisions of Alexander's empire. Therefore, Rome could not possibly fit the prophetic symbol of a horn arising from a horn within the Greek Empire. The little horn of Daniel 7 did not have its beginning until the fourth beast was divided into 10 kingdoms, which happened in 476 AD. The little horn of Daniel 8 was to come up in the latter time of their kingdom. Whose kingdom? Greece. Verse 23. Their kingdom refers to the four divisions of the Alexandrian Empire. Again, Greece. The latter time of or last days of the four kingdoms was 200 BC to 100 BC. Therefore, the little horn of Daniel 8 was to arise 6 centuries before the little horn of Daniel 7 existed. This difference in timing is strong evidence that the two little horn powers are not the same. Okay, all you got to do is read your Bibles for yourselves. Don't listen to what Adventists tell you. Read your word for yourselves. As a matter of fact, even Ellen White says that over and over again, but yet she continually contradicts herself and the Bible. They arise at vastly different points in human history. According to Adventists, the 2300 days began in 457 BC and ended in 1844 AD. During this time period, the little horn of Daniel 8 is supposed to be treading underfoot the sanctuary. According to SDA teaching, this began with pagan Rome treading underfoot the earthly sanctuary, and then later became papal Rome treading underfoot the heavenly sanctuary. This presents a whole host of dilemmas. Boy, does it ever. Rome did not have any contact with the Jewish nation until 161 BC. How could the little horn have begun its desecrating work in 457 BC, 296 years before it even came into contact with the Jewish state? Rome had no part whatsoever in the activities of 457 BC, and thus could not possibly be the little horn described in Daniel 8. Houston, we have a problem. Rome lived peacefully with the Jewish nation and did not even molest the Jews until after Palestine became a part of the Roman Empire in 63 BC. How could the little horn be trampling underfoot the sanctuary for nearly 400 years when it never even interfered with the sanctuary service during that time period? If papal Rome is the little horn of Daniel 8 during the latter part of the 2300 days, then what happened to papal Rome on October 22nd, 1844? Did the papacy suddenly stop defiling the sanctuary in 1844? Was it broken without hand in 1844? Why is there no event in papal history to coincide with the end of the 2300 days? Well, obviously, the papacy is still defiling the sanctuary, or the temple, which we are. Obviously, he's standing in the midst of them, still claiming he's the vicar of God, still with his same heretic dogmas. So I don't think he stopped defiling the sanctuary in 1844, so that's wrong. So obviously, no. If pagan Rome neither persecuted the Jews nor stopped the sacrifices in 457 BC, and if there is no event in papal history to coincide with the close of the 2300 days in 1844, then how can we possibly attach Rome to this prophecy? You can't. There is no way. It does not fit. Daniel 8 does not say that the four horns were absorbed by the little horn, as the four divisions of Alexander's empire were by Rome. The Roman application makes something quite different of the prophecy than is indicated by Daniel's symbols. One who reads the entire chapter cannot fail to see one event following another. The rise of the great horn, Alexander comes first. He rules for a time and is broken. His empire is divided into four new empires. The little horn comes on the scene after this division. This is the little horn of Daniel 8. See, one event is dependent upon another, folks. We can follow the course of these events through history. Now consider the following chronology carefully. Alexander died in 323 BC. His kingdom was divided in 301 BC. The little horn could not have come on the scene until after 301 BC. So how could the little horn be desecrating the sanctuary in 457 BC when the prophecy does not even show it arising until after 301 BC? A little side note here before I close. When you look at BC and AD, BC, like let's say 4000 BC, as the Earth gets older, BC it subtracts, like 4000, 3999, vice versa, But when it gets to year 1 BC, it switches to 1 AD, and then instead of subtracting, it adds 1, 2, 3, 4. So obviously this is nearing the AD period, getting closer. So again, how could the little horn be desecrating the sanctuary in 457 BC when the prophecy does not even show it arising until after 301 BC? Okay, I'm going to close part 1 here. Hopefully within the next day I will have part 2 up. Okay, this is just the beginning of a massive, massive study. I don't know how long it's going to take. It's going to take several videos. We're going to be going over Daniel 7. We're going to be going over Daniel 8. We're going to be going over Daniel 9. Because in order to understand Revelation and the beasts and the kingdoms in there, Daniel 7, even Daniel 2, Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, and Daniel 9 are vitally and extremely important. And is that key that is going to basically unlock the mysteries unraveled with these beasts in the book of Revelation. A lot of these commentaries and scholars have a lot of things right. But that's why I always mention glean, okay? Because even though they may have a lot of things right, they have some things wrong. And man is wrong. Scripture is not. Be like the Bereans and search these things out to see if these things are so. Truth be told, truth be known, stay safe. God bless. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.